Okay.
All right. The steelhead fishery is maintained entirely through stocking. There is some limited natural reproduction in some of the cold water areas of our streams, but it's insufficient to maintain the fishery. And since stocking is responsible for the persistence of the fishery, I'm going to spend some time discussing it because a tremendous amount of time, effort, and expense is devoted to it. Steelhead are stocked as yearlings, smolts, and they are the primary salmonid species that are stocked into Lake Erie. There are several statewide agencies like the Fish and Boat Commission on Lake Erie that also stock steelhead into Lake Erie, but we stock the bulk, nearly 50% or over 50%. Michigan Department of Natural Resources, New York Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Ohio Division of Wildlife stock steelhead. And steelhead are stocked in the spring from March through into May, but we tend to finish ours by mid-April. This slide shows the number of steelhead yearlings stocked through time by all the agencies that stock steelhead into Lake Erie. And you can see the number's fairly stable through time. Pay attention to the bottom bars, the light green, that's us. We try to stock about 1 million a year, and with the cooperative nurseries, we come close to reaching 1.1 million yearlings stocked per year. This chart shows all the different types of salmonids stocked into Lake Erie by all agencies combined. So what you'll see is the sort of salmon color bars for steelhead, and they comprise the bulk of all salmonids stocked into Lake Erie. You'll see some species that were stocked earlier that are no longer stocked, such as Chinook salmon and coho salmon. And the top bar, the black bar, is brown trout. And we began stocking brown trout into Lake Erie again as a put, grow, and take fishery in 2009. And we continue to stay. I'll discuss that in more detail later. Now this slide is all yearlings stocked by the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission of the different species over time. And you'll see now we stock steelhead, brown trout, and to a lesser extent, some lake trout. Okay, now I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail here about how we rear steelhead, what the process involved is. Broodstock collection takes place on Trout Run. That's the primary source of brood fish. The secondary source is Godfrey Run. We get about 85% of our fish from Trout Run, 15% from Godfrey Run. And some years we don't even need to go to Godfrey Run if there's a strong run in the creeks at the time when we're collecting fish. Broodstock collection occurs from mid-November through the first week of February. We're the only agency that uses feral broodstock. All other agencies use a captive broodstock reared in hatcheries. We do about 8 collections per season, spread out to ensure spawning fish return to the tribs from September into April. So we don't want to take all of our fish early in the season and kind of select for an early run. We want to spread that run out as long as we can. We only take the largest, healthiest, freshest fish in the best condition as broodstock. No fish are taken with lamprey wounds. We're a member of the Great Lakes Fish Health Committee of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and we follow their biosecurity recommendations. So there are strict biosecurity protocols in place to prevent diseases from spreading within the hatchery system, entering the lake and the tribs. All steelhead broodstock are manually spawned at the Fairview State Fish Hatchery. All eggs are tested for viruses such as viral hemorrhagic septicemia, infectious pancreatic necrosis, and others. The fish are held for 2 weeks after they receive an antibiotic injection, spawned and released. The collection goal is to get 30 jars of eggs, about 2 3/4 to 3.5 million eggs for the season. Each jar will have the eggs and milk from 5 females and 3 males. The brood fish after their spawn will eventually be stocked back in area tribs with no notice given. And we found this is very popular with the anglers, and it shows in my data that this can lead to very high catch rates on days when anglers are lucky enough to come across them. And you know, through Facebook, and this information spreads pretty quickly when there's suddenly, you know, hundreds of adult steelhead stocked into a hole. Our baseline stocking target for our agency, not the co-ops, for our agency is 1 million yearlings per year, about 80 stocking trips. Stocking takes place mid-February through mid-April. 13 locations are stocked. We allocate the stocking based on angler use and public access on the stream. So certain streams will get more stockings, like Elk Creek, Walnut Creek, 20 Mile Creek receive the most. We make slight modifications to the allocations based on new acquisitions, like new easements, any type of habitat enhancement work we'll do, which I'll discuss. And with a co-op contribution of roughly 50 to 100,000 steelhead a year, that takes our number up to about 1.1 million yearlings per year. It's an impressive number of fish. Again, it's just another slide showing the number we stock, which I showed earlier, and below shows the number we stock in blue and the number the co-ops contribute. So we have a few cooperative fisheries that stock the rear and stock fish into Lake Erie, steelhead, 3CU, and Wesleyville Conservation Club. So here's a table of the contributions. You'll see the primary contributors right now are, of course, our agency and 3CU, and the totals are on the right column. And we manage every year to produce roughly the same amount of fish. And this shows where those fish are stocked by source. So the biggest stockings are, of course, on Elk Creek, the largest, one of the largest creek, and it has a tremendous amount of access and parking available for anglers. Then Walnut Creek, 20 Mile Creek. The salmon colored bars are where the cooperative nursery stock their fish. So Lake Erie, and that means the mouth of either Elk Creek or Trout Run. And Bear Creek, I believe 3CU puts fish into there. That's a small tributary to Elk Creek near their hatchery. So they just release them into the little Bear Creek, and they go out into the actually no, I think there's a tributary to Walnut Creek there. I'm not certain. This shows the approximate locations where we put fish every year. This is the west side, and I'll show the east side of Erie later in those locations. Next slide. Now I'll discuss this a little more later, but the circled triangles are where we've shifted stocking locations in an effort to enable these fish to have more time to imprint on the release site. So they don't just immediately go into the lake. So anywhere it was possible to move a site upstream where we could do so legally, we did. And because we want to reduce straying, we don't want our fish to return to waters other than Pennsylvania waters, and even other than waters where they were stocked. So we want these fish to come back as adults to Pennsylvania, not to Ohio and New York. So that's why we tried doing this, because as long as the fish remains in the water as it's undergoing smoltification, more likely it is to imprint on the unique chemical signature of that tributary and the watershed and return to it as an adult spawner. And this is just showing the east side stocking location. We have done several population assessments historically. One, Godfrey Run, we have a weir there. Some of you who fished that creek may be familiar with it because you can fish at the mouth. And Trout Run, they do a broodstock collection in the fall, and we collected some data from them, but it's not good data because they're selecting a very non-representative sample of the fish. They're taking the best fish. So our primary source of quantitative data, biological data on steelhead comes through Godfrey Run. Okay. The history of this weir. This weir was built for the collection of coho broodstock, but it now serves as our backup source for steelhead. The purpose of this assessment was to collect quantitative data on adult returns and to do smolt emigration studies. We don't want to rely on just anecdotal data to track trends in adult returns over time and to track trends in adult size structure, such as the size composition of returning fish, their age structure, their condition, lamprey wounding rates, parasite infestation, and such as gill lice, And we want to find predictors of adult returns, whether that's flow rates or temperature or perhaps factors, biotic factors in the lake, such as walleye abundance years prior. We want to assess how management changes impact the fishery. So this weir did allow us to do that. And we operated this weir from 2010 through the fall of 2017, and we collected a total of 1,382 fish were observed during our fall spawning runs. Adult spawning runs we found were correlated with increased flows, and that's something we all believed before. We noticed that the size of adult fish had declined from 2009 to 2017 by about 3 inches. And that was primarily due to jack steelhead, precocious males being overrepresented as a fraction of total fish near towards the end of the survey. And we kind of hypothesized this could be due to smolt size at stocking. Maybe you stock them a little too large, they might become more likely to become a precocious male, or due to fewer older fish returning due to higher mortality rates, or maybe declines in growth rate in the lake due to poor forage abundance. Although this wasn't observed in trawling data up to 2016, but it was observed thereafter in lower forage abundance. It's still observed today in our waters. However, unfortunately, the survey had to be discontinued in 2017 because our weir was repeatedly vandalized, and things kept getting stolen. So, and if any of you are familiar with that area, it's a very secluded location, and it's just not possible to really monitor it. So, unfortunately, we weren't able to continue doing our assessment there. I'd like to, at some point in the future, maybe to install surveillance and to be able to bring this back, because it really was a great source of data for us. And, however, I wanted to recent anecdotal information from anglers and from the logbook suggests that the size structure of the steelhead population has improved. But unfortunately, we weren't able to document that through this weir. Okay, these two figures are just document what I was saying in the last slide. It's mean length by time. Left is all steelhead, right is broken down by sex, blue line is males, red line is females. And there was a decline over time. It seemed to stabilize around 2014. And you can see in the right graph that it was driven mostly by male fish, those jacks showing up, and we'll see that again here. As you can see here, these are it's length on the bottom, year on the well, what axis would that be? That would be the z-axis, and on the y-axis it would be proportion. So these are histograms of length. They're length frequencies, and you can see they're bimodal. There's two modes, a big mode in the center and a little mode to the left for some of those years. That's those jacks showing up, those precocious males, those smaller fish. That's what we observed. And this shows, again, similar data showing that, but for weight, showing that for males, the weight of the returning fish had declined over time. We observed that. For females, it was relatively stable. Interesting, the average weight in the fishery over time is almost 5 pounds for these fish. And this is, what this plot shows is the size of smolts at stocking. So this is something we definitely can control, and it does have an impact on the fishery. There's a concept of an optimum size at stocking, which will maximize returns to the fishery. So you could stock fewer larger smolt or more smaller smolt. At some point, there's a size in there that gives you the most bang for your buck. So, and some information from the literature suggests that larger smolt would emigrate sooner because they're closer to finishing smoltification and ready to migrate. And that could result in higher rates of strain because they're not able to imprint for as long on the chemical signature in the water, and it may lead to the production of more jack steelhead. But these fish would theoretically have a higher survival because they're larger, so they're less vulnerable to predation, and they have more fat reserves to help them survive longer in the wild until they begin feeding. However, smaller fish would be cheaper, and they'd stray less because they'd imprint more, but they'd have lower survival. Research the research literature on steelhead and some of our data, some of our experiments we did early on, like in the early 90s, suggest it's an optimum size of roughly 180 millimeters or about 7 inches. And so we've tried to reach that, and we've actually exceeded that in recent years. So that's what our target is to try to get and stay at 180 millimeters. Of course, that's an average. So there will be fish smaller than 180 and over 180. So that's something too. And those ones that are over 180 millimeters may be returning as jack steelhead. And now I'll talk a little bit about more about management now. Move away from assessments towards management. The things we can do as an agency to affect the fishery. So much of what happens to the fisheries is out of our control. Once the fish are in the lake, obviously we can't really do anything about that, how they survive, what forage is out there. So they're on their own at that point. But there are certain levers. There are population levers and fishing quality levers we can exert influence through. Population levers, the stocking level, fixed at 1.1 million yearlings per year. We can rear fish on waters within a Lake Erie watershed, such as at the Fairview State Fish Hatchery. Right now, I think roughly 30-some% of the fish are reared in the Lake Erie watershed at smolts, and the rest are at the Linesville hatchery. So if we do them, the more we can do here on the watershed, the less straying there should be, and the more fish will stay in Pennsylvania waters. But again, the hatchery capacity at Fairview is limited. So right now it's pretty much already maxed out. And sea lamprey predation, surprisingly, we can't exert control over that, but that's the responsibility of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They do that, and I'll talk about that more in depth in the coming slides. The number and size of returning adults, again, straying, small size of stocking location. We talked earlier about relocating stocking sites further upstream where possible. And fishing quality levers are things such as expanded access, create more fishing locations for anglers. We can do habitat improvement work where possible. We can create structures that enable steelhead to get over waterfalls and other barriers so they can get further upstream, and we've done some of that work already. I'll talk about that. And so I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. We'll talk about sea lamprey because sea lamprey are just, well, just say they're the worst. They're terrible. Each juvenile lamprey is capable of killing up to 40 pounds of fish over their 12 to 18 month feeding period before they mature into adults. They got into Lake Erie through the Welland Canal, a little bit of history, in the late 1800s and early 1900s when improvements were made to enable ships to ascend and descend the Niagara Escarpment while avoiding the falls. This is done for shipping, but it also gave sea lamprey access to all the Great Lakes. Sea lamprey were first detected in Lake Erie in 1921. And they've had an enormous negative impact on the fish community. And really nothing is immune to their predation. But certain species will only be predated upon when more preferable prey species aren't available, like soft-bodied salmonids, like steelhead. So catches of lake trout, lake whitefish, and ciscos dropped to approximately 2% of their previous averages by 1960. And during a time of highest sea lamprey abundance, up to 85% of fish not killed by sea lamprey had wounds. This devastated recreational commercial fisheries in Lake Erie and contributed to the extirpation of native lake trout in Cisco. This just briefly describes the life cycle of sea lamprey. They have a very complex life cycle. They require clean water and muddy substrate for egg and larval survival. The larvae mature into a stage called transformer while in the substrate over a period of 4 to 6 months where they develop teeth, eyes, and kidneys. They then migrate into the lake where they spend the next 12 to 18 months parasitizing fish. Each lamprey can consume up to 40 pounds of fish while becoming a reproductive adult. The adults do not feed while spawning. Adults spawn from the spring through the early summer and then die, completing the life cycle. And lamprey are vulnerable to control at 3 stages: as a larva, as a juvenile, and as an adult. So this figure here shows is an index of sea lamprey abundance in Lake Erie collected by federal scientists And the target index level is 4,400 adult sea lamprey. The reproductive adults, 4,400. That's the number we want to reach. And we've never quite gotten the 3-year average to there. The red line is the 3-year average. The individual circles are each year's individual estimate, and the bars are like an estimate of uncertainty. So you can see that the years towards the end of the plot, the circles are very small, very low sea lamprey abundance. We do believe sea lamprey abundance has declined in recent years. However, those numbers are artificially low because trapping conditions for adults were very challenging the past couple of years due to weather conditions. So they don't think, they think there's a large underestimate. Interesting, that target index is estimated as a mean of indices during a period when marking rates were considered acceptable from 1991 to 1995. So those dots on that time period are established at index target. Some of the reasons for decline in lamprey abundance could be the near record walleye year classes seen throughout the lake, that predation pressure on newly metamorphosed lamprey transformers, especially those in the Erie corridor. And there are also potential contributing sources of sea lamprey from hard-to-treat tributaries like Cattaraugus Creek, and also the potential for unidentified sea lamprey-producing tributaries and lentic areas. Those are areas that non-flowing areas, such as Detroit and St. Clair rivers and parts of the western basin of Lake Erie. Major efforts are made each year to control the lamprey populations. The focus is on control, not elimination, because that's impractical. Lampricides, chemicals used to poison sea lamprey, were developed in the late 1950s, early 60s by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. 2, we use our TFM and Balicide. These kill the larvae in the streams before they mature into parasitic adults. Most other organisms are unaffected, but some are, particularly native species of lamprey like mountain brook lamprey and others. And so routine assessment surveys and a scoring system determine what streams require treatment and when, typically every 3 to 5 years. There are other, besides lampricides, we have barriers because the jumping ability of sea lamprey is very limited. So very low barriers can prevent adult access to spawning sites while not inhibiting access of other species. And this reduces the usage of lampricides. New types of barriers include traps to capture adults. Existing dams can serve as barriers. So right now there's been a movement to remove dams, and that's generally a very good thing for the ecosystem, but in some situations, that can actually give sea lampreys an opportunity to invade a new environment. We have supplemental controls, which is the goal of reducing the reproductive potential of spawning populations within a tributary. There's a study being done now with 12 experimental streams for 12 years. You're going to have 2 questions they want to address that relate with, one is what is the relationship between reductions and reproduction via these controls, and age 1 sea lamprey recruitment. What ecological factors influence survival and growth from an age 1 to the juvenile stage. We know that adult sea lamprey use pheromones released by larval sea lamprey to find spawning streams. We know spawning males release chemicals that attract females. And we've also learned that alarm cues cause a powerful flight response in sea lamprey. And an alarm cue could be something to them that would be the smell of death. So if they smell a lot of dead sea lamprey in a stream, they tend to not go to that stream. So we could use pheromones in this research that's being done now to kind of push or pull sea lampreys towards traps or away from spawning sites. All right, now I talk a bit about fishing easements through the Erie Access Improvement Program. The first, this is that Lake Erie permit that you pay for fishing in the Lake Erie watershed that everyone pays. Act 159 established it, created the Lake Erie Access Improvement Program. The proceeds of the permit can be used to provide public fishing access on or at Lake Erie and the watersheds of Lake Erie. In short, anglers in the Lake Erie watershed have perpetual and high-quality access to fishing opportunities through the purchase of easements. And an easement is a voluntary and permanent legal contract between the current and all future landowners of the property and the agency. Eligible projects include acquisition of lands and property rights and/or development of lands to improve and maintain angler access. A major component of this program is to work with willing landowners to develop public fishing easements that allow fishing access in exchange for fair compensation. Recently, just this year, Act 56 was signed into law. This is an expansion of the Lake Erie Access Improvement Program. It enables grants to be provided, 50% matching grants to public entities such as nonprofits and local government entities. Eligible activities for this program include, but are not limited to, development of new, expansion of existing, or the rehabilitation of access sites, access roads, parking areas, ADA facilities, habitat projects, fisheries research, and fish cleaning stations. And none of this money will be used to support routine operations that are currently going on Lake Erie with the agency. And I'm going to, I have a link that I'll include on the presentation that gets, actually maybe I can get this to work now. No, I don't want to take that chance getting this link to work, but I'll try and include it and share it. Some of you probably may be aware of it. It shows all the locations of public fishing access on Lake Erie. You can get it through the agency if you go to the Lake Erie site. It's not that difficult to find. So it'll tell you exactly where the boundaries of these access areas are, all of them. Well, not all of them. I asked. There are a few that it hasn't been updated recently due to turnover in our GIS department, but this is going to be maintained indefinitely, so that'll get, the new ones will get added on shortly. Results to date, a total of $9.6 million have been used to fund more than 68 projects that acquired new or improved existing public access to the lake and its tributaries. $5.3 million have been used for projects benefiting shoreline anglers, such as steelhead fishermen. $3.6 million used for lake access projects benefiting boaters, and 28.7 miles of stream frontage have been secured. We've made some recent acquisitions that you may be familiar with. The Gilmore Farm property is about 181 acres along Elk Creek in Girard Township, providing over 6,000 feet of frontage. It's located immediately south of Interstate 90 off Beckman Road. Crooked Creek, we acquired 8.3 acres or 1,300 feet. That's located at the intersection of Happy Valley Road and Lucas Road near East Springfield. And 8 acres on Conneaut Creek, or 1,165 feet of frontage, located off Griffey Road near West Springfield. Those aren't on the map I just referenced, but they will be in the future. This table shows the linear feet of shoreline acquired on streams that have received easements in Lake Erie. So as you can see, Elk Creek has received the bulk, Conneaut Creek, Crooked Creek, Walnut Creek, and so on. And this is just a snapshot of the access site, the GIS site on the agency webpage. I'm showing you and you can kind of click on anything to find exactly where the boundaries are. And I do have the link on here, so you'll be able to enter that in. It's just easy to navigate yourself to it by going to the agency site. This is real brief. Our regulations have been static for a long time, and no new changes have been proposed. This just shows where our regulations fall in line with other agencies. We have a 15-inch size limit, a 3-fish bag limit. So we have the largest, most conservative size limit, and we're in line with everyone else regarding to the krill limit. Okay, staying on management issues, we're on focus on fish passage now. Most of the habitat work has been done on 4 Mile Creek. There's a bypass fishway was explored this summer. It was dredged out with an excavator, and then the drawbridge style gate for easier opening and closing was added. This kind of enables, you can see it down here. Here it is. It bypasses a waterfall, so it allows fish to get above it. But it does require regular maintenance provided by the golf course. And one thing is that it must be closed during high water at upstream entrance Otherwise, it'll fill in with sediment and rock, and that's what happened this year. And it was a ton of work to get that cleaned out. But I think there's one more of these bypasses on 4 Mile Creek, and there's also a fish ladder too, which is interesting at one of the 2 dams on the creek, the one closer to the mouth. And I've been told that it actually passes a lot of fish up the ladder. But the ladder, again, that requires annual maintenance too. So that's one of the things we do these habitat improvement, these types of fish passage work. It does require a lot of maintenance. So when we do this, we need to make sure that there's individuals willing and able to maintain this over time, because we just don't have the resources to do it ourselves. So, and that's why we got cooperation here with the property owner. Of course, we did have to go and bring heavy equipment in to dredge this out because it was left open during a high water event, I believe. And we also do dredging on Walnut Creek, stop sign hole, first hole downstream. We dredged that out to about 5 to 6 feet in depth. So now that'll help retain more fish. And there's an additional channel cut planned on 4 Mile Creek coming up. All right, we're done with steelhead. Now we're going to move on to brown trout. Our brown trout program is comprised of a catchable brown trout program and a put, grow, and take program. The catchable program supports a popular springtime tributary fishery. And the put, grow, and take program is just what it sounds. We put fish in, they go in the lake, they grow, and they come back, and you take them. The purpose of this is to create an early season tributary fishery for brown trout, adding diversity to the tributary fishery, and also creating a summer nearshore fishery. We decided to do this around 2008-07 because we noticed there were ecosystem changes we thought would support a large benthic piscivore, such as brown trout. And that was the high abundance of round goby, invasive species that we've observed in the nearshore waters. And we've learned over time that round goby are the primary prey item for brown trout in Lake Erie. They consume them voraciously. So from 2009 through 2013, our agency and the co-ops reared and stocked certified disease-free brown trout from the Rome hatchery in New York, provided from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We had a stocking target of about 100,000 brown trout yearlings from roughly 150,000 eggs that we were provided with. This slide, just in case you're looking at this figure here, this is round goby abundance from our trawl survey. So at the time we initiated this program, we had a fairly high round goby abundance in the lake. And then afterward, it crashed. It's still present, but it's much lower than it was prior. So that'll, I'll reference this again in the coming up. So beginning of 2014 through 2016, the cooperative nurseries took over the rearing and stocking of all brown trout because they could hold fish until spring. It's 16-month-old fish, and because our fish had to be stocked in the fall is 12-month-old yearlings. And I'm going to talk about this coming up. There's definitely a survival difference between a fall-stocked fish versus a spring-stocked fish. So again, in 2017, the co-ops wanted out of the brown trout program to devote all their resources to stocking steelhead. And by then, we developed our own captive broodstock program for brown trout. And we had to do this because New York can no longer meet even their own commitments for certified disease-free brown trout eggs, so we had to develop our own. We developed our own captive broodstock. We altered our hatchery practices to enable us to retain these fish an additional several months to release them as older, larger fish in the spring. You stock them in the fall, they're going in, they're smaller, they're immediately facing a winter, their survival is lower, and I'm going to discuss this soon. And this year is the 12th year of the program. The mean size we stocked last year, the brown trout, was roughly almost 9 inches, 2.5 pounds. 16-month-old fish. This shows the number of brown trout stocked per year over time. Blue bars are us. Reddish colored bars are the cooperative nursery. Basically, just shows what I described on the last slide. We tried to get that 100,000 target, and we finally reached it last year. This table shows the beginning of the program until last year, stocking rates by different sources. 3CU, Wesleyville Conservation Club, contributed substantially. And we finally met our target. And yeah, this program is going very well as far as what we can do on our end. Okay, a lot going on in this slide. This is during the Steelhead broodstock collections every fall, we have an opportunity to sample brown trout. And because they're in there early. As you can see from the table, brown trout are in early and out early. So the purpose of this is to evaluate we did this to evaluate the relative performance of our fish versus the co-op fish. We wanted to see if there was a survival difference. So we marked fish. We gave unique fin clips to co-op fish and our agency stocked fish. And then we waited for them to come back and we evaluated which performed better. And so in total, we collected about 755 fish from 2012 to 2018. Every fish measured, checked for fin clips, wounds, sex determined, and then they're released. You can see here on this slide that in the early years, we noticed immediately that co-op fish are dominating the returns. These are those 16-month-old yearlings that are stocked in the spring versus our fish, which are smaller, stocked in the fall. So we knew we needed to hold our fish longer and release them as larger fish because we just weren't seeing returns of our fish. So, and the blue bars are unknown fish. These are fish that don't have fin clips. They could be catchable brown trout that ended up going into the lake and surviving. They could be brown trout stocked by other agencies in the lake, and there are many that are stocked. So, and what we've seen over time is more of those unknowns because we stopped our fin clipping. And so eventually we stopped it, we learned enough information, and we didn't need to continue that study anymore. But in terms of the numbers of brown trout we've observed over years returning to Trout Run, that one particular stream, we saw very good early returns. And then the numbers just started to drop. And they've been kind of steady and stable. And in terms of numbers observed, this is a length frequency distribution. And average size of brown trout, like 20, 22, I think I have the result, the actual data here. No, I don't. It's roughly 22, 23 inches the average size. So very large fish. We've seen some, I've done a lot of this work myself. I've been involved on almost all this work, and we've seen some gorgeous fish come in there. And it's exciting to see them. And now they're caught in fewer numbers than we initially hoped. But when you catch one, it's a cool thing because, you know, expecting to catch steelhead and you catch this great beautiful brown trout. It's pretty exciting. And this shows where the largest brown trout are taken. This is Pennsylvania's 2019 largest brown trout. 4 of the 5 locations are on Walnut Creek in the Lake Erie watershed. And surprisingly, a large one was 14 pounds taken for Penn Creek. And we set a state record. You may be familiar with that. We set a state record this summer. It was caught off, or this fall, it was caught off of the condo. So 74 feet of water. I mean, if you fish Erie, you would know where that is. It's between Walnut Creek and the peninsula. It's a 20-pound, 9-ounce brown trout caught. So that's our new state record. Where we are now, brown trout represent a small but exciting addition to the fall fishery. We'll continue our stocking program indefinitely. Success will depend on the biomass of available lake forage, particularly on round goby, and it's going to depend on how much predation pressure is out there. I'm sure you're all aware that there's a very substantial walleye population, historically large walleye population in the lake, and that is probably having an impact on the brown trout. Perhaps it's having an impact on the steelhead fishery now too. And this fall we're going to renew the Trout Run assessment and see if anything's changed. Okay, now for the final part of the presentation, I will talk about our logbook survey. called the Lake Erie Cooperative Angler Logbook Program, or LECAL for short. This survey provides quantitative data on fishing quality in the steelhead fishery, and it's our only source of such data. It includes catch rates, release rates, stream usage. We use it to evaluate the effect of any management changes, such as a small change in small size of stockings, moving stocking locations, all that stuff. We see volunteers of all avidity and skill levels, from people who fish often to people who maybe fish only once or a few times a year. All data is good data, zeros count too, we like to say. The pilot year for the survey was in 2012. The logbooks I used were used in an existing survey. I'm still running through the old stockpile we have from a survey that was done back in the early 2000s. And it's entirely voluntary. So here's what the logbooks actually look like. Each book contains 21 trip entries, and we prefer people fill them out immediately after they're finished fishing for the day to reduce recall errors. If you need an additional logbook, it's returned, and it's box checked on the front to let me know that, and I'll just return another one to you. How it works is if you indicate interest in the program, provide me contact information, address, name, address, email address, phone number if you wish to share that. I will send you out a logbook with a stamped self-addressed return envelope with instructions, a recruitment letter, and then you fill it out. If you complete it during the season, send it back to me. Let me know. I'll send you another one right away. And just send me the book as soon as you're done for the year. As soon as you're done fishing for the year, send it back in. And then once I have all the logbooks received and I enter all the data, I'll analyze it. I'll write a report. I'll send everyone who participated a report. It will contain all of your data and everyone else's data, but all the data is anonymous. So you won't know you'll know what the average angler caught, but you won't know what any particular angler caught other than yourself. It's all private. And this little thing, you can kind of track, well, how well did I fish? How well did other people fish? Which streams fish best? Which streams fish worse? That sort of information. And it's kind of like an angler journal. So you can put any information you want in this, catch details, notes, and after I get all the data and produce the report, I will send all this back to you. Sometime in early summer, spring, I'll send your logbook back to you and your report. And then I'll try to recruit you again next fall. This map I made, it just shows where our fishermen or logbook volunteers come from. This is prior to this year. I've got a lot more. That Allegheny County and Pittsburgh area is going to brighten up a lot after this year, thanks to your help. So, but as of now, most of us come from Lake Erie and the surrounding counties, with a good amount from the Allegheny County, Pittsburgh area. This isn't related to the logbook survey, but it does show regional steelhead. I wanted to show this because it puts Lake Erie in perspective relative to other areas where steelhead are caught. Their native habitat here on the West Coast, 0.2 fish per hour. This is produced. This chart was produced by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Jim Markham, he's a colleague. Shows Oregon catch rates on the Upper Great Lakes, catch rates on Lake Ontario. And here's Lake Erie catch rates. They have the highest catch rate. So much higher than you'd find in their native environment. This shows some of the results we've had through krill surveys done in tributaries. We've actually done some of this work ourselves, but due to the expense, we haven't done it recently. These two are ours. So there's been sort of like stable periods of time where the catch rate's been higher and lower. This right here, done by New York, this is very close in 2018 to what we've seen in the catch rate recently. So we think we're at about this level now. This shows the catch rate that I've observed from logbook participants. And as you can see, it's increased and stabilized at a fairly high level, 0.6. Again, I think there's probably some avidity bias to my data, though I do have a lot of people that don't fish often and they aren't that successful. So I try to get a mix of people in the program to sort of, it's not overrepresented with people who are very skilled fishermen. Oops, sorry. Okay, here's the number of participants over time. The most was in like the early years of the survey. I was like 36. And then last year it dropped down a lot. That's why I made a big effort this year to recruit people. And I've already sent out, I think, 55 logbooks this year. So number of trips, number of steelhead caught in each year by volunteers, the total effort in hours, and their catch rate over here. So for the past few seasons, we've been at about a 0.6 catch rate. The way to think of that is a 0.5 catch rate would be one fish every 2 hours. And this shows the success rate, however you want to define success. If you consider success catching only one fish, it's 75% last year, and roughly in that range throughout the time series. 3 or more fish, pretty good. 64, 50%, that's pretty good, but we'll see some days people have tremendous catches, way more than that. What this shows, each line is a separate year, a separate fishing season, catch per hour over a month. So this is sort of like the seasonal patterns we observe. And there is a seasonal pattern we see. The highest catch rates typically occur in the winter months, which is interesting. And they decline rapidly in the spring as fish leave this tributary, and they increase in the fall as fish enter. I think around this time is probably when the most fish are in the streams, and it's possible by then maybe the best anglers are the ones that are remaining in the cold winter months. So that may explain some of this higher catch rate too. So, and what I've been able to do is actually look at catch rates for individual creeks, individual streams, and the major streams, ones that show the most pressure, 20-mile, Walnut, and Elk, have the most data, and these estimates are more reliable than ones on Crooked Creek. I tried to limit these plots to streams that in each year received at least 5 trips. However, again, sampling error would affect these smaller, less fished streams. But here's Elk Creek, and here's what we see in 20-Mile Creek, and what we see in Walnut Creek. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can get this to work. Okay, sorry, that's not gonna work. I didn't know how this process would work. I have one slide here that's probably not going to be displayed because I had to link to a separate presentation to display it, and but it's not a terribly important slide, so I think I'll just move on from this, maybe find a way to add it on later. All right, and if you choose to volunteer for this survey, here's my contact information. Just send me an email and state your interest, and I'll set you up, get your logbook out right away. And that's it, I'm done. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mike, that was awesome. Dan Knox asked, and I have a bunch of questions from some people, so if you don't mind answering a few. He asked, are there any, could you list some of the handicap accessible sites for steelhead?
Oh, I can get that information. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can get it. I mean, I know one place that's coming to mind, the first place is obviously at the mouth of Walnut Creek. But I think there's a place on 20 Mile. I'll research that, and I'll get back to your group on that.
Okay. The other question somebody had was, will you continue, once somebody got the logbook, will you continue to send them the logbook each year, or do they have to contact you each year to get it?
They don't have to contact me. I'll reach out. Every fall, I send out an email, or if I don't have an email address, I'll make a phone call, and I'll just make sure you're interested, because there's some expense involved in us in shipping out the logbook, so I want to just send them to people who may not be interested. So each year I'll pre-confirm that.
Awesome. Okay. This was a question that I had. When you say a jack steelhead, what is your definition of that? Because I know I've heard jack salmon, but as far as like jack steelhead, what would the definition of that really be?
We think of it as a precocious male, or a male that matured early at an earlier age in a smaller size and returned to the tributary to spawn.
It's kind of the same as the regular jack salmon. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike? I'm sure everybody has questions. Ryan, you got one?
I have one. Mike, thank you. That was really insightful. And for somebody that's newer to the Pittsburgh area and is not as familiar with Erie, you helped a great deal in understanding what the
Oh, great.
dynamics are. I did have, there were a couple questions, but I'll throw one out right now. Have you been able to do any assessments on the impact of 1.1 million steelhead going into the Erie ecosystem every year? You talked about a record walleye population and talked about all these different factors. What they're eating. Have you determined by putting that type of pressure, the predation of that steelhead do in the ecosystem, how that's affecting the overall fishery?
Well, there's no doubt that the steelhead are exerting a lot of having a large ecological impact in the lake. We stock 1.1 million, but we don't know the exact percentage that do survive as adults in the lake. It's going to be much smaller than that. As far as I know, there's really not much research done on steelhead in Lake Erie. It's not a native species, so it doesn't really attract grant money or a lot of state agency interest in funding it. And we don't really have even good diet information because we don't really do open lake assessments for steelhead. We do assessments for yellow perch, for walleye, lake trout, for a native species, but we don't have we pick them up incidentally in some of our assessments. They tend to be more near shore, more pelagic. Most of our assessments are like benthic lake bottom assessments, gill nets, trawls. So we don't really encounter them too often. I think so there's really just not good information about what happens to these fish once they enter the lake. So it's like a big, we just don't know what they do when they're out in the lake and when they come back at that time period.
Doesn't sound like it's affecting the walleye population, which would set people off. So that's a good thing.
If anything, it's like a good food source for walleye when they first go out in the spring. Because when they go out in the spring, that's when walleye, that time of year, walleye are near shore. They're near the creek mouth. I'm sure there's a lot of predation. We've seen walleye with smolts in their stomachs that time of the year.
No wonder why there's a jump in population. You're feeding them.
Yeah, we've been feeding them. I think they know. I think they just show up at the tribs that time of year just to wait.
They're not stupid. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask Mike while you're here? Mike, could you go back to your email address again? We had someone asking for your email address again. It's Mike Hosack at pa.gov.
Well, M. Hosack. M-H-O-S-A-C.
M. Hosack. I'm sorry. Right. M. Hosack at pa.gov.
If you have a question, you can also chat it in at the bottom if you have that and send it in.
Jody has one, so go ahead, Jody.
Not sure I'm going to be able to see that. I'm not sure how to see that.
No, well, we can read it.
Okay.
Jody has a question, and I don't know if she can unmute.
It's actually not Jody, it's Ian.
It's Ian, okay.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Thanks for the talk. Given the how can I phrase this best? Given the recommendations on consumption of steelhead and other large fish out of Erie, has there been any thought to actually reducing the bag limit on steelhead?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks.
Well,
Mike, this kind of goes along with chapters. A lot of people in our chapter do a lot of catch and release.
no doubt. And I should have brought up a slide. Most people catch and release is a very high release rate in the steelhead fishery. It's over like 90%. There are certain areas in the fishery where the release rate's lower, like around the mouth of Walnut Creek, because there's more harvest-oriented fishermen go there. But yeah, in general, it's a high release rate.
Do you ever see the Fish and Boat Commission making, a section of a steelhead part? Now, I know we've tried to advocate for it before, but do you ever see that happening where there's a catch and release section only of water? Or do you ever see it going that way, or have you, there's been a discussion about it?
I can say there's been, as long as I've been here, that's been brought up, but it's never like, there's no real discussion of that, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. But who knows what will happen in the future if the returns decline at some point enough, there may be an interest in that. But right now, I can say there is no interest in that in the agency, but that's not really a decision that I make. So.
Right. You think that's just because of the catch rates and the health of the fishery? Is that?
Yeah, it's because it's a put, grow, and take fishery, and it's the catch rates tend to be pretty good, and yeah, as far as I know, that's probably not going to happen. But I guess if you want to continue to advocate for that, I would do that, but it's going to take probably a lot of effort from a lot of people beyond maybe certain groups that have traditionally advocated for that to probably make that happen.
Thanks. Anybody else want to ask Mike any questions?
I did have a question, Mike, because if nobody's going to raise their hand, I don't want to hog it. You made a comment about the importance of imprinting on the stream, and smaller smolts released into the river system spend more time in that river system and imprint, and then go out, so they'll come back. But you mentioned something that kind of struck me, that the co-ops are releasing their fish right at the mouth. And that if I follow the logic, they were releasing larger fish, and that they were releasing with the mouth. So the likelihood that those fish were imprinting on the stream is really low, which means they're going to pick any stream.
That's true. They are raised in the Lake Erie watershed, so I don't know. If that make them less likely to stray to Ohio, New York waters, we don't exactly know that. There are probably some similarities within our watershed here. But yeah, they do release some into Bear Creek. I think I have the numbers on a slide. I don't know off the top of my head what proportion they release. But yeah, if they're releasing them right near the mouth, then they're just going to emigrate out very quickly and with little time to imprint on the waters. So yeah, they could potentially return, have no real bearings when they return. They'll just go, forever.
Well, and it really struck me. I was thinking about this because a lot of people I talk to that go steelhead fishing are talking about the numbers of steelhead that have really gone up a lot in Ohio. And then you showed the numbers that the different states release. Ohio doesn't even come close to releasing as many as we do. And I wonder if we're stocking their streams.
Yeah, we're kind of probably, we put so many fish in, we're supporting, New York's fishery to an extent, Ohio's fishery to an extent, but we're also putting enough in to sustain our fishery. So, yeah, I don't think there's too many options. Like, we tried to move sites further upstream, and I think the co-ops did too, but we're all limited in terms of where we can access the stream, where we can put fish in. Like on 20 Mile, you can only go so far upstream to release fish. You just can't go any further. There's nowhere else to put a stocking truck in. So yeah, I think at this point, when we've been trying to work on this for a while, and I think we've done about as much as we can with that. But yeah, when you stock them smaller, they tend to hang out longer and imprint more. And I don't know exactly where the co-ops stock their fish. I was told they stocked them near the mouth, and that's what I was told, near the mouth. So I don't know, like, if that's, right at the mouth, or if that's like a mile from the mouth. I was told near the mouth, so.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, anybody else? I'll give everybody enough time to ask a question if you have one. Well, Mike, we can't thank you enough just for your expertise, and we hope that our chapter, Penn's with West, can help you out this year.
Oh, you've been great so far. Yeah,
Getting things back. That's going to be the getting it being a good Steelhead day. But we really appreciate you coming out, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
great. Remember, all data is good data for the survey. You know, if you come out one time, it's worth it. If you don't catch anything, we want to know that too.
Awesome. All right. Well,
All right,
thanks
thank you
everybody
so
for
much.
attending. And Mike, we'll be in touch. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
That it came out tonight. We appreciate it.
All right, appreciate it too.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. And everybody that joined
Bye.
us, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out. We'll let you know what happens next month.
All right.
All right.